Hi everyone, and welcome to the Daytona office hours. I now forgot which iteration this is, probably like the 8th or something. As always, we have a review of the last release coming up, and then we'll talk about some of the changes we're currently implementing and what we have planned for the next release. And of course, along with some contributor highlights as always. Okay, so let me just share my screen for a sec. Okay, let me put this out of the way. If you don't see my screen, just let me know. I think you do. Okay, so and as always, you can stop me at any point if you have any questions, and I can people joining. Still, Ivan, can you mute yourself, please? Okay, so the last release we had coming from last week was release 0.24.0. This is a bigger release. Wait, let me just mute even myself. Okay, this release was quite substantial. We had a lot of fixes, chores, but most importantly, a few bigger features implemented as well. So let's dive right in. So let's work through the features list so we can see that we implemented a get URL from repository API route. I implemented that. This API route is meant for supporting clients that integrate with Daytona, and that it just makes it easier to create workspaces if you don't have access to concrete repo URLs. So for example, this allows you to create a repo URL from a commit hash, from a branch, from a PR URL, etc. Then we have add workspace status checks to code and SSH commands. So this is just a UX, let's say, candy that checks the state of the project before executing code and SSH into it. It just makes it easier and more clear to the user that the workspace or project is stopped while attempting to connect to it. Then we have AWS CodeCommit support by John Wick. So AWS CodeCommit as a Git provider was requested by one of our external contributors, and John Wick implemented it in the past couple of weeks. And this now gives us, I think, most of, if not all, Git providers covered in Daytona, and just makes it, let's say, more complete and accessible to users using AWS CodeCommit. And then we have probably the biggest feature of this release, and that's project configs by our maintainer, Ivan Dagelic. So this feature is, let's say, a big UX improvement for creating multiple projects and workspaces with the same configuration. So if I just do a quick demo of what that looks like. So if I do Daytona PC new, and PC is just an alias for project config, I can choose GitHub, and then I can choose my, let's say, Daytona IO organization. I can choose Daytona as a repo, and then I can choose a build configuration. So for example, I don't want this repo to be built. I want some environment variables like test equals test. And that's it. I will now create a project configuration, which I can list with Daytona PC ls. And this is the default build configuration for this repo. Now, if I run Daytona create, you can see that I can create a project directly from the configuration that I already did. And this repo here, sorry, this project here will be configured with the default builder of none and with the environment variable I set. So this UX improvement is, it just makes it easier to reuse existing configurations and to not worry about project configuration even more when working with Daytona. So moving on to the fixes. Oh, by the way, of course, if you want to learn more about the project configs, there's a big section about it right here. And because of this, we also had a breaking change in this release, which just requires you to update your providers with Daytona provider update. That's it regarding the project configs. So regarding the fixes, we have just a fix to not throw errors on Control C. So for example, you might have seen it there. So if I do Daytona create and I do Control C, okay, it throws it here. But if I do make a blank project, it doesn't throw it here. Okay, so we have a bug live in production, as we often do when doing demos. So we will fix that in the next release. Ivan, take note, please. Okay, so the next fix is inform user if VS Code ID is not installed locally. This is just a UX, again, improvement that informs the user how to install VS Code, the VS Code CLI if it's not installed locally. Then just a login CTL note that I made for Linux Server Daemon. This actually was a small bug that was reported by Nico, which meant that when you run Daytona as daemon on a remote machine and then you log out of the machine, the Daytona server daemon stops, and now we just add a login CTL message that says that the user should enable linger to the user, and that the daemon can then persist through logout. Then we have handled the error message for incorrect token. Nothing special. This was made by Harkirat, and this change is just a fix for inputting a wrong token on the Git provider, more concretely on the Bitbucket provider. I think I noticed that a few weeks ago. Then we have add a root user check on serve. This was made by me because Daytona Daytona remaps ownership of repository files. When you create a project, it's important that the server is not run by root, by the root user, because when it's run by root, we cannot remap ownership, and that's something that's actually not the Daytona related, it's just Linux related, and there's nothing we can do. So we just suggest to the user that they don't run the server as root. Then we have just a fix for dev container local environment overrides. Nothing special, just a fix that now the dev container local environment variables inside the config should work appropriately. Then authenticated the provider config before adding it to the DB. Again, this is a fix for again, authentication and adding Git providers before adding them to the database. Then we have Git provider for URL interface, just a small fix by Ivan before we released this on Friday. Chores and tests, nothing special, just a server yes flag description, Swagger version update. We bumped some dependency, or dependabot did. We added a README to the Docker package. That's something maybe interesting to our contributors. So the README in the Docker package that we have just outlines how to test the package, and it says that you can do it via our Daytona Docker provider repo, and you can actually use our Daytona Docker provider locally to test the changes. And the code is, of course, open source, and you can maybe contribute there and open up issues or contribute to existing issues on that repo as well. Okay, so then we have the last chore and test, which is remove duplicate repo validation by Abhishek. This was actually code that was introduced by Abhishek, but then again removed by him a few weeks later. We actually decided that the workspace can have multiple projects of the same repo inside of it. So, for example, you can run the Daytona repo multiple times in a single workspace. So this just removes that validation from the front end and makes it easier to create. As you can see, we have two new contributors. It was Titan Ventura and John Wick. So as I said, John Wick submitted the PR for AWS CodeCommit, and Titan Ventura did the status check for code and SSH command. And as always, we love to see new contributors over to the repo. If you want to contribute, or if you know someone who wants to contribute, feel free to direct them to our issues board. Okay, so that was the last release of the release from last week. Now, if we take a look at what we have coming up in the next release, as always, I just test that by trying out the release notes right here. We can see that we have a small chore. We allow users to submit the form earlier now. This is, again, a small UX improvement for the Daytona server configure form, which is quite long, and now users can early submit the form without entering a lot. Then we have reverse Swagger version update. This is just a chore to actually write the development version in the Swagger file rather than the actual release version. And then I made a change to use a different config directory in development mode, and I can even demo that, I think. I have Daytona open right here. So this is Daytona running in Daytona. So if I do Daytona ls, for example, I can see, just do it like this. So Daytona ls, I can see that I'm running Daytona because this command actually talks to the server outside. But if I do Daytona or dpn ls, this is the development Daytona. You can see that we're actually, this command fails because I don't have Daytona running inside of this project. So this was just a change to use different config folders. If I do ls config Daytona, you can now see that we have Daytona and Daytona dev as the configuration folders, and this just makes it easier to run Daytona in Daytona. Okay, I think that's that. Let's just take a brief look at the open PRs and what we have coming up in the release, which again should be on Friday. I made a small refactor to the purge command. This now doesn't require the user to run the server before running purge. It now requires the user to stop the server before running purge, which should be easier for users as well. And just kind of a huge refactor code-wise to the purge command, which will make it easier to handle later on. Then we have a couple of draft PRs. These couple of PRs are waiting for the contributor to let us know the progress, but the PR that we will definitely push to the next release is the build runner PR by our contributor Luca. This is quite a big PR, as you can see, 37 files changed. This essentially is a refactor and a refactor to the build process that we had before, and also it adds these so-called build runners, which essentially act as services that run builds that are in pending states. And this is actually very important for features we have coming up on the roadmap, and that's pre-builds and also remote builders for running pre-builds as well. So this PR is a great foundation for these features. Maybe we can take a look at a couple of issues we have opened. I guess these are mostly bugs that we have, small bugs, most of them opened by Nico. Nico is our favorite QA tester these days. But I don't think there's anything worthwhile here. If we take a look at the bounties that we have, oh, my bad, not the backlog, but the bounties. Apologies. So we do have 23 bounties still open. So if you want to contribute to the repo while fishing bounties, you can. We have quite a few of them open, and we tend to open a few of them maybe per week as well. So if anyone has any questions or something that they want to discuss about Daytona, about not only the Daytona product, but I don't know, providers, the Daytona company itself, or anything, feel free to jump in. Or not, as always, you can join our Slack. You can join us on the repo itself, and we're always open for discussion as always. Okay, if not, if you don't want to get recorded while while asking questions, it's fine. I'll stop the recording in a few minutes, and then, or a few seconds, and then we can continue the chat after as well. Okay, going once. Okay. Okay, so thanks for being here. I'll stop the recording and we can continue the discussion as well. Thanks as always, and this will of course be on YouTube like every week. Thanks and bye.